Hello, welcome to Wisdom Hour today. The question I have today is about whether it's right to end a relationship or not. It says, my relationship to my partner and father of my children is very negative and full of mistrust, blame, guilt and hurt for a very long time. Due to growing up in a very unhealthy home myself, I don't seem to have a feeling for when it is truly over, enough, or at the point of no return. So she wants to know, how do we know that when we're at that point of no return, or this isn't working, isn't going to work, and we need to move on. Okay, so let's see what her very wise self has to say about that. Go to get clear on how to place myself in the center of my world and know what is good for me. Okay, so you are getting yourself confused by all of the other questions that are related to this question for you. Questions like, how will this affect my children? And how will I live if I leave here? And how will I support myself? And how will I survive without this relationship in practical terms? These questions are all very important questions, but they won't answer the fundamental question that you are asking, and that is, really, is this relationship good for me? And will it ever be good for me and my children? Once you know the answer to that question, you can go about addressing all of the other questions, and they are often practical considerations, but they rely on this first question to be answered clearly. When you know whether this relationship is actually good for you or not, you will know how to proceed, and then the other questions will take their own priority, and you will have to address them one by one. So we need to know how we know if a relationship is good for us or not. Some people think that a good relationship is always happy and never has arguments and never has anything bad happen. But this is not true, and in fact this is a fairy tale version of a true marriage or partnership. Within any marriage or partnership, there will always be times of argument or dispute or great learning through getting your own perspective widened by the perspective of your partner that doesn't agree with yours. This widening of perspective is actually good for you, although it feels hard and it can make us feel like the partner won't ever agree with us about anything. This is greatly beneficial for your evolution and your education, because too many people stay stuck in their own limited perspective in life, and this is in fact quite childish. This is correct for a child to experience, because as a child, every part of their existence seems to be all about them. And it is this way because to develop as children and to get what they need to develop, this is correct. And so a child will cry or get angry or get your attention in any way it can, and it soon learns what works and what doesn't. But if in adult relationships we still use the same patterns of childhood to get what we want, that is either tantrums or pretending we can't hear, in case you couldn't hear because that went off, or pretending we can't hear, or pretending that the other person doesn't care about us because they are trying to do something or get us to do something for our own good, then if we carry these childish, self-centered things into adulthood, you can see how they cause a lot of problems within relationships. So as we develop and get older, we must learn how to see things from other perspectives, and this is part of maturing. Often within teenage years, your perspective is still quite self-centered, and so the person can't work out what is so important about cleaning or what is so important about being polite and responding to someone when they talk to you. We get it right. Teenage years. Okay. And this is all based in an immature perspective that doesn't understand what is important about these things to other people. Not to the person themselves, but to other people. And so, when a teenager won't respond or doesn't listen when they're asked to do something and ignores every request, their parent has to persist and get the young person to start to recognize that their perspective isn't the only one. And this is done through discussion and teaching, not through nagging. The reason we bring this up about the teenage years is because your partner is still stuck in a teenage perspective. And this is one of we need to do everything the way I want it done, or else I don't want to do it at all. This perspective won't change unless he gets help and recognizes that he has this perspective. Without his awareness of this, nothing can change, and when he does find out that he is presenting himself in your relationship like a teenager that can't tolerate anything other than his own perspective and getting his own needs met, then you may have some chance of this relationship mending or healing. Unless he is prepared to do some work on himself in this way, things may seem to stay pretty much the same, and your work on yourself to try and change your perspective and allow a wider perspective and a more mature perspective may not be enough to allow this relationship to be healthy. As you are working on realizing your own great fears from childhood and how they impact on the way you relate in your relationships, you will find that you get clearer about what is your stuff and what is your partner's stuff. This stuff we are talking about is any behavior or language or action that upsets you. That upsets you. Just because we become upset with a partner's actions, reactions, language or behavior doesn't necessarily mean that what they're doing is wrong, but it does mean that there is some mismatch going on in terms of either getting clear on where your uncomfortable feelings are coming from. You may blame the actions of your partner for the uncomfortable feelings you feel, but they may be generated from you and from a past issue that is having its buttons pushed. This is very common in close relationships and can really confuse people. So if we're getting very upset with something our partner is doing or saying, we need to take a close look at our personal history and notice if what he is doing is reminding us of anything that was painful to us in our past. For example, as a child with our father, or as an older child or teenager with a male or a love interest, or so on. When we have gotten clear about how the behavior is affecting us in terms of what buttons it is pushing, then we can get clear about our own responsibility in the relationship for placing the feeling where it truly belongs and the cause of the feeling where it truly belongs. When we do this, we allow the other person to express themselves fully or behave in a way that suits them or get their needs met in a way that suits them. But when we get confused about where these feelings are coming from and we blame the partner for them because of their words or actions that have pushed those old buttons, we don't realize that these feelings are ours and ours alone, and the other person is not trying to make us feel bad, nor are they getting your world entangled with theirs. It is the other way around. Of course, this can happen both ways, and then things get really complicated. So you could be pushing his old buttons, and he is blaming you for all his pain and feelings, and he is doing the same to you. And this gets truly complicated and difficult. However, this is not insurmountable if both parties are prepared to look at their past and be open to looking at the pain that the partner's behavior brings up in them. So, this is different to causing it. It is reminding the person of something in the past, and this triggers that old pain. And if it is a childhood pain, it can feel terribly overwhelming and huge. And this can be completely out of perspective with the reality of the situation with the partner currently. And the partner will react in these ways. They are incredulous. They don't know what they've done wrong, and they feel like you are being unreasonable and will feel very hurt by your response. Sometimes they will become angry because they don't understand what the heck is going on, and so become very frustrated. And so this anger is born out of frustration and not from aggression. When you are clear about how your buttons get pushed and the main triggers that you have, then you can practice being mindful of that. And so when the partner does something that pushes those buttons, you immediately recognize that this is what is happening, and you don't blame the partner and get into a big argument about it or attack back. Instead, you become very mindful and you go away and think about it, and you get clear about what is yours and what is his. When you get this clarity, it won't change the fact that your partner may be placing himself in the center of his world and won't widen his perspective for you. This can happen, and it is not your fault if this happens, but if you stick to your part of the responsibility to mature and be clear about what is your stuff, then you start to become very clear about whether he is prepared to also do this work and widen his perspective so he understands how you feel and what you need in the relationship for it to be positive and to be affirming and to be supportive. When you can get clear about this and ask for it clearly, he will either respond with a genuine attempt to widen his perspective and give you what you need to thrive in the relationship, or he will retreat back into his teenage perspective of it's all about me and you have no right to ask me to develop in this way, and you don't care about me if you expect me to change, and so on. When there is a troubled relationship and yours sounds like it has many issues, there can only be healing if both sides are prepared to work hard at it and put their own limited perspective in its rightful place. When you can see things from your perspective and also from his, you can begin to work with him from within his perspective. Now, this sounds like you are doing all the work and helping him immensely while he doesn't help you at all. And in fact, this is true. And so one must have a generous heart towards the other person to do this. When the other person won't engage as a mature adult these are your choices. You can either walk away, or you can notice how he experiences things, and in knowing his perspective, you can address him from the point of view of knowing what he is trying to get for himself, and work with this to encourage him to open his eyes and ears and develop these adult traits. Many people do get stuck along the process of childhood and growing up. This is not unusual, and you will find that when you are clear about your own developmental issues, you will be less judgmental about his. You will realize that we are all dealing with great unconscious aspects to our personalities, or of our personalities. By this we mean there are parts of ourselves we just don't see or recognize, but other people see them and recognize them. And it can be hard to accept that what another person says about us is true when we can't see it in ourselves. Yet this is the challenge of the shadow that Jung talked about and learned about, and he was so right. What a gift he gave to mankind and womankind. Each person's shadow is not apparent to them, and it drives their behavior and what they do and say in a phenomenal way. But unfortunately, they are not aware of this driver, and so they do things and they justify things from another perspective entirely, which is the perspective of you make me do this, and you don't understand me, and you always look for the worst in me, and you are worse than me at that, the that being anything that is in the person's shadow. In other words, they often will project this shadow onto other people and say, you are 10 times worse at ... than I am. And the answer to this is not to get into an argument over this, but to realize that they are not aware of the shadow part of their personality. It seems hard to believe, doesn't it? But this is true, and the sooner you recognize this, the easier things are. They are not doing it on purpose. It is in shadow to them. They cannot see it, they are not aware of it. And they fight to keep this suppressed all the time, because to see it and acknowledge it would mean that they don't know who they really are. And this is quite terrifying for many people. But there is nothing to be afraid of. We all carry shadow, and each person has parts of their self that can be hidden, either all of the time or at different times. They remain hidden until the person is prepared to look deeply into themselves and recognize that they too are able to be this way. For most people, what they judge others for the most is what they have hidden most deeply in their shadow. So every time we want to judge someone, that is a good cue to say to yourself, am I ever like that? Have I ever been, let's say, cruel? And you may say, I've never been cruel. I am not a cruel person. Cruelty is horrendous, and I would never do anything cruel to anyone. But the truth is, you have been cruel. And every person has been cruel at some point in their lives because they are human. And to be cruel doesn't necessarily mean you have to lock someone up in an attic and feed them water and have them as a slave or anything like that. To laugh at someone when they have done something embarrassing, or to get pleasure out of watching someone else suffer in any way, is in fact cruelty. So, when you recognize that every single trait that the human being has is placed within the human psyche, then you won't feel so bad when you allow yourself to recognize these traits albeit maybe very small, but to recognize that, yes, I have done that too. Or I also have I also have I also have what's the word? Is it a big word? No. I also have prospered from I don't get it, prospered from putting someone down behind their back or something like that. Okay, so in other words, it's saying, look, we're not talking about, as it said, big terrible things here like, murdering someone or, It's saying that as humans we have all that. We have the ability to do that, and it's sort of part of being human. We have light and dark, and hopefully we don't have too much of that dark stuff. But we all, you may not even say it out loud, but like if you sniggered at somebody under your breath because you think, oh, they've made a fool of themselves, that's a type of cruelty. It's taking pleasure in their suffering, or in their embarrassment, in something that has not made them feel good. So it's about being aware of that, so that you can look at yourself and become real about who you are, and not be so judgmental about others. Once you recognize these seeds in yourself, it's much easier to be compassionate about the other person's struggles with their shadow and so on. Okay, so it's just recognise we've all got it, we all do it, and it's just a matter of degree. Okay. Whew. Seems to be going on quite a long time, this one. I put my watch down. So there is a lot of learning here, and it won't make a decision for you, because nobody can make that decision for you, and it would be wrong for anyone to do that. As an adult, it is your decision and your decision alone. But if you can learn from all of this how you can start to separate your stuff from his, and get clear about whether there is any prospect of this relationship being able to develop and heal, then from that place you are better equipped to make that decision. We wish you luck with this. We wish you all of the best, and we encourage you to keep working on yourself. This is the best thing you can do. Okay, there we go, folks. So, lot of complicated stuff that you might have to listen to that a couple of times to get it through. And for anybody else out there who's struggling with any kind of relationship, it doesn't have to be, with a partner. It might be a parent-child relationship, could be, with your parent, all of that. Anything where we get closer to people, you'll find that all of this sort of stuff can be the most problematic. All the shadow stuff, all the, not being sure whose perspective are we looking at it from really? How far back is this really going? That kind of thing. So good luck with that, and to anybody else who's watching, I hope that whatever happens, you can work towards a peaceful and hopeful outcome, whatever that means for you and for the other person. Okay. Anything else? Anything else? Okay, there we go.